Hi everyone. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Kirsty Boyette, and I'm the executive director of the historic nonprofit, community-based, mission-driven State Theater. We are celebrating our 85th year. We opened on Christmas Day in 1934, so we're really happy to be here and appreciate your continued support, even though we're not open, but we love to be here supporting you and supporting us in any way that you can, because we want to reach out to you as our supporters and supporting any way you can, because we love to see your faces. We get to kind of see your faces a little bit, or your voices, but we appreciate you participating in this. This is our 5th virtual educational seminar. We're super excited to have Dennis here, who's an esteemed author, and Randy will introduce him. But I kind of wanted to talk about our next one is September 24th. The movie is going to be My Cousin Vinny with the Judge Earl Johnson. He's a retired Stanislaus Judge, Superior Court. So we're really excited about that one. So stay tuned for that. We also have coming up in October, right before the fun election year, we have in front of us is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And we also have the movie Election. So those are both going to be in October, prime time. And we've got Arnold Schmidt and Randy Siefkin and Larry Giventer hosting those. And then in January, we've got Chinatown. And in the spring, we're going to host The Birds. So this is a great program. We love it. We'll continue this on, even though hopefully when we reopen, because people really enjoy this. And I personally enjoyed this because I saw The Natural years ago, but to hear Dennis's inside scoop before I watched the movie again gave it a whole new light. So that's why we really enjoy this program, and we're happy to give it to you. And we're giving it to everyone for free. Other theaters charge $10, but we're the State Theater and we love you, and we love that you support the State Theater. So I will be sending out a Survey Monkey tomorrow, in the next few days, kind of asking for your input. And then also, if you want to give a donation, we'd love it. But again, this is just, we want to stay relevant in the community. We've got some membership programs. Come by and get some popcorn tomorrow night. We're selling popcorn every Friday that we're not doing drive-ins. And also, on another note, we just started doing drive-ins at John Thurman Field on the west parking lot. We have a couple dates: September 19th, October 3rd, October 17th, and Halloween weekend. So we don't know the movies yet, but stay tuned, because we got to think outside the box these crazy times. So a couple housekeeping things. Everyone's on mute. I think so. Oh, not. Oh.
Just disappeared.
I disappeared?
The whole panel disappeared.
Oh, really?
Did it for the others?
I can see you.
Just me.
I can see all of you. You and Dennis, can you see me?
No.
I see everybody, nothing changed, so.
Okay.
Nope, let me try again here. All right.
Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Randy Siefkin, who is a movie aficionado and one of our esteemed board members. And he's been on the board for a very long time. If you need to know any questions about movies, history, 35 millimeter, anything, Randy is your man. So I'm going to step out of this beautiful backdrop that I've got here, and I'm going to turn over to Randy, and he's going to be the moderator for the questions that you, so click on, sorry. When you look at, if you want to ask a question, click on Q&A, not chat. Oh, perfect. Arnold said you can see us. So put the questions into Q&A, and Randy will moderate that, and that's the best way to ask questions. And Dennis he knows how to do this, so he knows he can just talk and talk because this is his passion. So we appreciate Dennis for being here, and now I'm turning over to Randy. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Kirsty. It is a great pleasure to be on the State Theater Board and to be part of this program and to introduce Dennis, who is, speaking of aficionados and experts, is passionate about the sport and has a breadth of knowledge that I find really stunning. As a Dodgers fan, you know, we always leave in the seventh inning and don't pay any attention to much of anything. So we're delighted to have him here. I first met him last year when he did a live presentation at the State Theater about the film Field of Dreams. And it was a terrific, fact-packed film presentation, and he was absolutely delightful and accommodating and appreciated by our audience. So he is a three-time finalist for the Casey Award for Best Baseball Book. I'm assuming that's not Casey Stengel or Casey at the bat, but he may have to enlighten us a bit later. His most recent book from 2017 is Lefty O'Doul, Baseball's Forgotten Ambassador. And if we were live, he could be in the lobby after the film and autograph them for you, but we'll just have to wait for that to happen. He also reviews sports books for the New York Journal of Books and has lots of other high points that I'm not going to go into here. He's sitting in a chair in Roseville, where he is an assistant superintendent of a school district, but he does come to Modesto frequently because he spent 47 years as the public address announcer for Downey High School, particularly its football program, which we hope is scheduled to resume in January. We will see. So, Dennis, you picked this. Last year, Kirsty. I don't know why that's Kirsty's still there. So,
Sorry.
we don't want to tell them to go away. Or do we? There we go. So last year, he was gracious enough to build a program around a pre-selected film. This year, he expressed a desire to do it around the film The Natural. And of course, we were going to do it live, and we're no longer allowed to do it. So he graciously consented to do it this way as part of our ongoing program. And so the first question I would like to ask is, why did you pick this film?
Well, I think it's a very interesting film. It's an unusual sports film in that, there's some similarities to Field of Dreams in that both came from very popular novels in sports. So I think there was that piece of it, but it's quite different. It's a more big mythic picture versus Field of Dreams. Both are rooted in a lot of factual information. Both have Joe Jackson, Shoeless Joe, as kind of an inspiration for the story. And his story, it just shows his story is one that's fascinated people for 100 years now. Someone that talented who would throw that away, and what kind of conflict that brings. It's kind of a natural conflict in a story. I've always liked Barry Levinson. I'm a big Randy Newman fan. It has a lot of elements, The Natural, that, and it's one of my favorite sports films. So I think for those reasons, I find there's a lot there in the stories that were taken from some of the baseball stories that both Bernard Malamud took from, and then kind of taking the idea of the old Frank Merriwell stories, the juvenile novels of the 30s and 40s in sports, where the hero overcomes the odds, and kind of turning that on its head and then comparing that to the movie. You know, just all those elements I've enjoyed.
So how would you rank it among sports films generally and baseball films in particular?
Well, it's one of my favorite baseball films. Sports films depends on how you define sports, because there's been a lot of great sports movies. Hoosiers is one, for instance, in basketball, and you've got some great boxing movies, whether it's you know, Raging Bull, or even Cinderella Man. There's been a lot of sports lends itself well to movies, I think. The Natural was interesting because I think even though there's not a lot of baseball in it, it was one of the first movies that I think they really paid attention and tried to get good athletes involved in playing. And after that, you saw more movies like that that tried to make the baseball look a little more realistic. If you go back to the 50s and 60s, and even Bang the Drum Slowly, which is a classic baseball movie, the athleticism really isn't there. And this was the first movie where they used ex-minor league players. They, even though the baseball itself isn't much the focal point other than Roy, it still lent itself. The pitchers looked like pitchers, and Robert Redford did. As I said, I've interviewed quite a few players over the years and talked to them about baseball movies, and one that they invariably point to is the work that Redford did, and that he really looked like a ball player to them. So I thought that was a good compliment. As far as how it stands in movies, I mean, it's one of the more popular ones. It wasn't a gigantic hit at the time. I think it did about $40 to $45 million at the box office. But it's one that's stood the test of time. I think it's one that is still popular more than 35 years later. And I think it would, if you ranked a top 10 in sports movies, I think it would definitely be there. And if you're talking baseball, probably the top 3 or 4, but it depends on, Bull Durham is a very different kind of movie than The Natural, and The Natural is quite different than Major League. And so there's a big range, and then Field of Dreams is different than that. So there's really a wide range of types of baseball films, but this and I think Field of Dreams are two that appeal to even fans who aren't particularly baseball or sports fans.
So Ken White chimed in and asked about films like 8 Man Out, also about Shoeless Joe Jackson. Are there others?
About Joe Jackson?
Yes, correct.
I think those are the big 3. 8 Men Out was very faithful to the book. The book, however, is not that faithful to what the real story of Joe Jackson and the Black Sox is. There's a lot of issues over the years with that story, but it was the first one told. I think that was a movie that was more into people who were really into baseball and understood the story. I think the movie made more sense to them because it's very detailed. And if you're not familiar at all with the Black Sox, separating the different characters, I think could be difficult. Whereas you take something like The Natural, it's really a universal story that's been told different ways. Whether we talk about Arthurian legend or the mythic stories. I think even today's superhero movies, it has something kind of in common with that everybody understands that story and character. I liked 8 Men Out a lot. I don't think it's as beloved because it's much more of a technical baseball film in the sense, or a straight historical story. It has conflict, but it's told from, you have several different viewpoints, whether it's Eddie Cicotti or Joe Jackson or Buck Weaver. You really have that movie comes from several different viewpoints. And if you're not familiar with those people, I think it's a little harder for the non-hardcore baseball fan to get into.
So Jeff wants to know, how does the film differ from the novel?
Well, really, the biggest differences are probably the main character of Roy Hobbs. Roy is a much more conflicted, complicated character in the novel. He's much more cynical. He doesn't particularly like fans. He thinks fans kind of are using him. He's much more selfish. He does go to the judge and ask for more money. He ultimately does agree to throw the game. He has a very complicated relationship with Memo Paris in the book, where Memo basically wants to have nothing to do with him, and that just makes him want to chase her more. And it's much more about him ending up learning a lesson in the end, although it's a rather it's not the uplifting ending. He ends up striking out after he decided not to throw the game, and then basically beats the judge up and throws the money back at him. And in that sense, he's kind of been redeemed a little bit, even though it's kind of a downer. He didn't succeed in the normal sense. That's probably the biggest difference. Another difference is that Iris, who's Iris Lemon in the novel and Iris Gaines in the film, Iris Lemon did not grow up with Roy Hobbs in the novel. The first time that Roy ever sees Iris, and the first time Iris ever sees Roy, is when she stands up at the ballpark. And then there's that conflict on should Roy pursue Iris or Memo, which is in the film. It picks up from that point similar, but they did not know each other. They did not grow up with each other. His background, family background's the same, although they don't talk about the mother in the film. In the book, she's a rather despicable character. There's a point where Roy is at the plate at that final, at one of the final moments in the book, and he's thinking back to the time his mother actually drowned a cat. He doesn't have fond memories of her, which also complicates the relationships he has with women in the novel. In the movie, it's much more straightforward that he's just kind of fallen prey to women that he probably shouldn't be casting an eye on, and should go for the wholesome person, which is more straightforward. But those are probably the biggest differences. There is a character named Otto Zip, who's a dwarf, who's in the novel and is not in the movie. And he's sort of an antagonist of Roy early on. He's a big booster of Bump Bailey. But most of the other aspects, as far as Memo being related to the manager, Pop Fisher, and then Pop and the judge having this bet over who will control the team, and people trying to undermine and throw it so Pop loses the team to the judge the next year. A lot of those are basically the same, and the whole scene with the whammer and the shooting, those are all elements. And a lot of the best lines from the movie are from the book. So, and actually Bernard Malamud enjoyed the movie, even though it was different than the novel. He commented that he actually did like the movie and thought it legitimized him as a writer.
So you made a comment at the outset about Redford and the respect he earned for his prep as an on-field player. Do you think he was too old?
A little bit. I mean, I think especially when he was trying to be 19. There's a little bit of those scenes with him and Glenn Close early on that you're kind of going, gee, he's a little long.
47, for goodness sakes.
Gee, gosh, I can't wait to head off to the big city. Yeah, I think, but as far as I think Winnie's Roy, in some ways, being a little older, I think works for him in that Roy's supposed to have gone through the ringer a little bit. And that very first scene when it opens up with Roy at the train station, which almost looks like a painting. I mean, yeah, I was thinking Edward Hopper. It looks just, and there's several, it's amazing. There are several scenes early on where Caleb Deschanel, the way that he frames it, there's several, you could just stop it right there and it looks like a Hopper painting. It's beautiful stuff. And it really evokes, you get the feeling from Redford in that very first scene that he's been through something, that he has regrets, that things haven't gone the way that he wants to, and he's not sure how things are going to come out. And it's a wonderful scene with no dialogue and it's a static scene, but it works, I think, really well. And so I think that's an example of a scene where I think his age works in his favor. But I think the early scenes with against the Whammer and stuff like that, you kind of go, well, he's not 19. I would agree with that.
Or even 35.
Or even 35.
He's doing the comeback. So you don't agree? I mean, Ebert was very critical of his characterization and said this was really idolatry for him. Did you see it in a similar way?
I don't know if that's fair or not. I don't know that you could have, Redford at that point, you have to go back to where was Redford at that time in his career. He was really picking and choosing his subjects, and he's got an image. I don't think they went out of their way to idolize him. On the other hand, at that time, having Robert Redford with a down ending probably wouldn't have worked. It could today, maybe. Not with him at 80. I think he really looked past the prime. But sometimes you have to work with where a guy is in his career. You had Barry Levinson, who this was really his second film only. He'd done Diner, and that's it. And Redford had seen that and was a big fan of it. And Redford actually wanted Levinson to do this movie. I don't know. I mean, Hollywood is a business. You have to sell popcorn, you have to sell soda, and you have to sell people to see it. And I think it was an entertaining movie. Certainly it's a mythic character, so it's going to celebrate. If you really love the novel and you love the complexity of it, I could see where you don't like the ending. It's a little schmaltzy with the whole stadium going up in fireworks, but on the other hand, he's either going to succeed or fail. Those are the two choices when you get to that point. And I don't have a problem with him succeeding.
Do we know anything about the 16-year gap between the shooting and his?
It's in the book.
Well, are you going to ask?
We're getting coaching. Robin.
No, I thought we were mute.
So you're a baseball historian. How would you compare baseball in 1939 with baseball today?
Well, one, it's integrated, so you have a lot more talent that can take part, including now you have the Japanese involved. It's really a worldwide, major leagues is worldwide. Athletes are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. I'm amazed at some of the defense that's played these days, the athleticism compared to even 30, 40 years ago. The game, though, has kind of become a home run derby a little bit, and I think it loses something with pitchers not going the distance. I mean, now I'm going to start talking like the old curmudgeon. I wish it was the way that it used to be, but I do remember the days when the game that you chose depended on what the pitching matchup. You wanted to see Marichal against Jim Bunning or Spawn against Koufax, or you wanted to see, or Seaver against whoever, even going into the 80s, Maddox against somebody. And I think that baseball is such a mano-on-mano game. It's a one-to-one game. It's hitter against pitcher, and I think it loses something with the way that it's played now. But athletically, I think the players are clearly a lot more superior. Was the game fundamentally better in the 30s? It may have been, because I think you had a lot more opportunities for boys to grow up and play. You had town teams everywhere. You had, baseball didn't have as much competition in the 20s and 30s to find the best athletes. You get into the 60s and 70s, suddenly football and basketball are attracting some of the better athletes, where baseball kind of had a monopoly. That was the best place for players to make money. It was the best exposure they could have. And so they grabbed a lot of the best athletes that I think they didn't have that monopoly. You get into 60s and 70s when television really came in, and I think changed how sports is presented and helped some of those other sports.
What about equipment, uniforms, etc.? How have they changed?
Well, you had the old flannel wool things, and now you have stuff that's really breathable, and the bats. I don't know if they're better or not. Someone else could probably answer that better than I could. Baseballs are changed out every time, basically every pitch almost. The gloves
same size.
Yeah, baseball's the same size. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, gloves are generally bigger than they used to be. Bats have to meet a certain standard, but over the years, if you go back, I mean, you had if you go back to the 20s and 30s, you had people using 49-ounce bats, 46-ounce bats, 43-ounce bats. Not all the time, but almost, like swinging a wagon tongue, as they used to say. Now it's thin handle, bat speed, bat angle. Those are the things that everybody preaches these days.
I read somewhere that the hats are different, and I hadn't noticed that. I guess I didn't pay any attention to it.
I haven't either. I haven't heard that. It's probably true, but I mean, they had the felt hats back in the 30s and 40s, which they were wearing in the film. But
Dennis, this is Kirsty. I can't ask because I'm a panelist. Do you think the Wonder Boy would be allowed today?
Probably not. No, I don't think so. No, I don't think you just bring a homemade bat. And I mean, I guess if it got weighed and specified, I don't know what the rules are on bats. There's certainly length and weight restrictions, and I don't know whether if it fit in that and you put a lathe on it at your home, I guess maybe, I don't know. I don't know what the rules are on that. But I don't think I've ever seen it happen. Let's put it that way.
So Ken would like to know, what the heck was Roy doing between the ages of 19 and when he came back in his 30s?
Feeling sorry for himself, I think. I don't know. I mean, obviously you see in the film, and I don't remember whether this is in the novel or not, you have the picture of the woman after Harriet Byrd shot him. She obviously jumped out the window, and there's kind of an ambiguity over whether he was implicated in that or not. I think that does talk about that in the novel, that it's not only being ashamed of the situation, but was there some whisper that he was at fault and had shoved her out the window versus her killing herself, which is what we assume because Roy's a hero in the movie. So whether he felt he had to go away or whatever, there's a 16-year gap in the movie and the novel, and I think it's anyone's guess as to what he did during that time. Alan doesn't really talk about it. Yeah, he jumps forward largely to jump. His real purpose in that is to jump Roy from being the person who starts out going past the whammer who's past his prime, and now taking kind of the whammer's place, but without the whammer's great career. But I think we all understand he had the same talent that the Whammer did, and now he's kind of at the end, and he faces that in the novel where he gets struck out by the next young guy coming along. I think his name is Youngberry. And of course, in the movie, he doesn't strike out, but it's the same. He's reliving the same thing that happened with the Whammer. But that's a good question as to what happened during that time.
Another book there.
Yeah, the sequel.
Right. So you and I were talking this week about how clean shaven players were in the film, except for
the manager and the coach. So you had Wilford Brimley, who unfortunately just passed away a couple of weeks ago. And with his trademark walrus mustache, obviously his contract allowed him to keep that. And Richard Farnsworth, the coach, Red Blow, he also kept his. And both of them were, the mustache was a big part of their persona. So, and obviously with Levinson in the second film, they weren't going to do that. Maybe with Scorsese or somebody, maybe they would have, but they were not going to do that, obviously, because they look the same as they did in all the other films they were in. And that would not have flown in 1939
I
at
get
all.
those rules.
No.
So if Hobbs were playing today, what would his numbers look like?
Well, I kind of talked about that, and Bill Simmons went through a whole kind of exercise, a little fanciful, making some suppositions, looking at how many things happened in the film. I think he came up with 400 at-bats for Roy with 44 home runs and a 350 batting average. That's probably as good a numbers. Obviously, superior numbers, probably the best there would have been at the time. It's interesting, some of the newspapers that they have, that they show real briefly in the film, have the actual, Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio were kind of fighting for home run and RBI leadership, and it actually is accurate from what I understand of where they were at those particular times in the season, which I think was another clue Simmons used on what had happened by a certain date, et cetera. But obviously it's conjecture, but those sound like reasonably dominating numbers that I think he would have had.
So
he did have that slump in there, so that's why he didn't hit 400.
That's right. Frank DeFord, always liked as a sports writer, says that The Natural is almost a swell movie. Is that a fair description?
Well, again, I think it depends on how you come at it. If you come at it comparing it to a piece of literature, there's probably an argument to be made. If you're talking about an entertaining movie that tells a good story, I think it's fine. I think it is a swell movie if you look at it that way. I think I'm not trying to cop out. I think it really depends on how you come at it, which I think is true of most art. How you come at it, what your experiences are, what your expectations are, and what you want to get out of it plays a lot into how you respond to it. That's why there's so many different types of art.
So looking at that film from the perspective of an expert on baseball, were there any bad calls in the film?
I didn't look at it that closely. I know the guy who bunted, and I think he was safe at first, early in the film. As far as how the game is played, most of the baseball was kind of jokey at times. There wasn't a lot of real strategy or telling you about how the game is played. In some ways, it almost resembled today's game where Roy just always went up to hit a home run. Although he didn't take a lot of pitches, it always seemed to hit the first pitch. while the players looked athletic and the pitchers looked like pitchers, most of a good chunk of the baseball in the movie seems that was for comic effect, whether it was Phil Mankowski, the ex-Tiger and Met infielder, getting hit in the groin while he's looking off to the right. Now there are other points where like Bump Bailey interferes with a fly ball, and Bump's clearly part of the ring that's trying to throw. See, they don't really emphasize that in the movie, but that's part of what he's doing. If you call it faithful with the novel, is he's part of the ring that's trying to throw games, have the team not win, so it'll end up with owned by the judge. And that looked a little contrived, but it was supposed to be contrived. He even got benched because of that, because it was so obvious what he was doing. So the baseball itself, other than the players looking more like ball players, the baseball itself was really secondary, I think.
So question again, Robert Duvall, the character in the film, who was he? Who was he based on? You have any idea?
That's a good question. I think he's kind of a columnist and cartoonist. So could have been a little of Robert Ripley, who did a lot of sports sports cartooning at the time. Maybe with Ring Lardner, but that's a good question. I'm not sure if he was based on any particular person or a combination of people. Someone else might know that. I'm not sure.
And another question from someone who obviously has thought about this film. How big was Black Beauty?
I do not know the answer to that. Black Betsy you're talking about, you mean? Joe Jackson's bat?
Yes.
Right. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Black Betsy.
Thanks, Ken.
I don't know.
I was going to, wrong movie. What?
Yeah. Well, there's horse racing movies.
10 hands.
But his was sort of a homemade bat too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. I don't know whether, I think my impression has always been it was a bigger bat than you would see today. And it seems to me it was a fairly thick-handled bat. But I don't know if that's just my impression or whether some kind of fact is stuck in the back of my brain or not. I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay.
And that's my question. This is Kirsty. If they were to make a natural 2.0, or who would you think would play the lead character?
Oh, that's a good question. We got to get someone from Modesto. I don't know. That's a really good question. I guess it also depends on, would you do it the same way, or would you go with more something that's closer to the novel? I think you might pick a different actor depending on that. Again, that's kind of goes back to where I think with Redford, if you're going to do the ending the way the novel is, I'm not sure Redford would have been who you would choose. So some of that might dictate who it would be. If you're going to go with the novel, you're going to pick someone a little bit more complex and someone you're kind of guessing that maybe you don't trust them, or you're trying to guess their motives and whether they're going to do this or not, that they're a little tricky maybe, versus Redford, who is playing it much more, the character was much more a hero, and you would pick someone who was more heroic. So
Tom Hanks again.
Yeah.
Too old, right?
Yeah. I think that's the difficulty, is picking someone who has had life, looks like they've had life experience, but is still young enough to be athletic. That's not easy to find.
Right, and his life experience is a big secret for the most part of the movie. You don't really know
Right.
where he's been.
Right.
And we know it won't be as good as the original.
No.
Oh, never is.
But maybe I like Ken's idea. How about those lost 16 years? I think that would be a good story.
Good book, Ken. So do we have other questions out there?
Dennis, what's your next virtual educational seminar going to look like? Which book are you going to choose next?
I don't know. I haven't thought that far. This 2020 is enough to get through in and of itself, I think, right now.
Well,
And the
we're always
smoke factor we're all dealing with. And you're sitting outside, so I'm impressed.
Someone said, one of my friends said that, you know, they really wanted to deal with 2020 in a different way. I said, well, I don't want a do-over. Let's just move to.
We need the fast forward button.
Yeah, exactly.
right.
I did a little research. So Glenn Close did Big Chill in 1983
Right,
and The Natural in 84. I
right.
thought she looked an awful lot alike in those two movies.
Yeah, yeah. And she was the only actor to get an Oscar nomination for The Natural, which it really wasn't that big a part. It's kind of interesting, but
I thought the same thing. It really wasn't that big of a part. And the fact that she got nominated, that was very interesting.
unless she really played the 11-year-old girl in the beginning, then maybe that's why, because that was tremendous if she pulled that off.
That's acting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised by the fact that, because you said that, and I was like, wow, she really didn't play that big of a part. It wasn't that monumental. But we've got another question. Has any baseball player ever broke a scoreboard clock with a hit?
Well, this particular incident, there's some people who tie it back to a minor leaguer named Bama Rowell who did it in the minor leagues. I don't know if it was a clock or a light. And I know a light was broken out with sparks showering in the Pacific Coast League, I think in Sacramento in the 30s. So a couple things similar, which whether Malamud got the idea from that or not, I don't know. The clock, I don't think is in I can't remember whether that's in the novel or not, but.
Yeah, I don't either.
We have seen somebody go through a fence, though.
Yes. Rodney McRae, Pacific Coast League. That they play that one over and over and over again. I think it was in Portland.
Did he die as a result of it?
No.
Okay.
But I don't think he felt very good afterward.
So,
But that was pretty monumental that he passed.
Yeah, there actually, I think one of the Malamud was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, which Randy should be able to appreciate. And I think a lot of the running into the wall, there's a lot of speculation that was Pete Reiser. That was inspired. Pete Reiser was a fantastic, kind of the Pete Rose of his day, except he kept running into walls. And when you play for the Cubs, which he did for a while, and run into the brick wall, that's not good. He had a lot of concussions, things like that really shortened his career. But he was very much the Pete Rose of the 40s. And there's a lot of thinking that that's where Malamud got the idea of the guy running through the fence and hurting himself. Whether that's true or not, Malamud's only had one or two real comments about the book. He's never really talked about the inspiration. He did talk about that it was related to Jesse Weston's Percival legend and T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and then stuff he read, autobiographies he read of different ball players, especially Babe Ruth and Bob Feller. Feller being kind of the opening part with the dad and throwing the ball against the country guy throwing the ball through so hard it goes through the fence of the barn, which Feller was 17 when he reached the major leagues. He never played in the minors. He went right from the farm to the mound in Cleveland. And so those are really the inspirations that Malamud has talked about. He really didn't talk a lot about where he got his ideas.
So, I don't see any other questions. Anybody else out there? Jeff, Ken, Cassandra, Kirsty, Diana? Weigh in with questions.
No, no question from me.
No questions. All right. So, Kirsty, are you going to play us out here? So,
She's
Left
selling,
the room.
she's selling popcorn in the lobby.
selling
I'm
popcorn.
talking and you, Arnold has a question. So I was talking and I had myself on mute. Arnold has a question. What do you think sports says about American ethics? In the past, players cheated, shoeless Joe, etc., and paid a price. More recently,
That's a good one.
Good question.
deflated the balls, telescopes to steal pitch signals, players cheat and get a slap on the wrist.
Good question.
I think it's a reflection of society
Yep.
and people's shifting feelings about fair play. And I mean, I think all of us could weigh in on this question. I think we're probably, I don't feel especially qualified to weigh in on it, but I think we've gotten away from the idea of things for the collective good over the last 40, 50, 60 years. And I think some of that comes home to roost now in selfishness and wanting things your way, and basically the end justifies the means. You see that in business, you see it in sports, you see it in politics, you see it in just about every facet of life. It's something that we have to battle, I guess.
We have a question from Jeff. You previously mentioned the Arthurian elements in the film. Can you expand on that?
Well, so you have Pop Fisher, who sort of represents the Fisher King. You have the bat, which is kind of Excalibur, forged from lightning. The team, the New York Knights. So you have a lot of characters and allusions to some of the Arthurian stories, and trying to be pure, but always kind of having trouble maintaining that line, the kind of the Percival story, as it said. So,
Well, and the wound was to his hip, and that's
true.
part of the myth also.
And I think there's something with like Pop Fisher's hands, especially in the novel. He has a lot of trouble with his hands. You have a lot of like the rain, and especially in the novel, the rain and the greening of the field, and there's just a lot of pieces of that. I'm certainly not an expert on Arthurian legend. There's probably some of you out there who know it a lot better than I do.
Of course, the temptations, Sir Gawain, and the temptresses. So there was that whole aspect as well.
Right.
And some have alleged that you could also find allusions to Greek mythology in the film. The Odysseus on his journey.
Well, and he talks about, have you read it, or Harriet Bird asks Roy, have you read Homer?
Homer. Mm-hmm.
But whether that's people stretching it to fit a premise, I don't know.
Arnold may weigh in on that score.
Arnold has one more question. Is cheating in sports today reflective of our ethics today?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think it is. And certainly then how do we, like you pointed out in the previous question, and how do we deal with it? Do we deal with it on an even-handed basis? Do we condemn it, or do we, or do we look the other way, or the slap on the wrist that you're talking about? It does, I think, have something to say of our values.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions?
We could have Pete Rose weigh in on that aspect, I guess. Could we not? Or the Houston Astros.
I feel like Ken's coming in with another question. No?
You still have people debating whether Joe Jackson should be in the Hall of Fame. So it's not just today. I mean, there's, but today's attitudes are a little different, I think, about it. In some ways good, some ways bad, but I think we don't sometimes take, I think we've gotten away from ethics being a core value in some ways.
Do you have any idea what salaries were like in the late 1930s?
Well, you had, probably you were looking at the top players. Ruth was a real exception when he was earning up to 80,000, but your Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio's, so were probably making 30 to 40,000, which I don't know what that would be in today's dollars, but it wouldn't be anywhere near 30 million a year. There's so much more money in the game. TV has made a big difference in that, has really driven a lot of that. And so there wasn't, even your top players usually had to take off-season jobs. I mean, I still remember in the 60s when Lou Brock was a big player, he worked in a florist shop in the off-season. I remember reading about that. And this is in the late 60s when he'd been on 3 World Series teams, 2 world champions. So.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? I'll come back to video. Now you can see my beautiful State Theater background. So I want to thank Dennis for taking the time to put together a 30-minute presentation, which I know is not easy, but you are obviously very skilled and probably didn't take a lot of work. Randy for moderating and asking the great questions that all of our participants asked. I will be sending out a survey, as I mentioned, to learn how you felt about the timing of the day, the days of the week, all that good stuff. And again, asking for your participation and your sponsorship or donations to our wonderful nonprofit. And Randy liked to say historical, mission-driven State Theater. Those are Randy's words.
You forgot nonprofit.
Nonprofit. I said that. But yes.
And we obviously would solicit ideas for upcoming programs like this. Please submit those.
That's part of our survey is future programming. And we love anyone that wants to moderate, facilitate, or just we want to hear your thoughts on what you would like to participate in. So I appreciate you all being here. Again, Dennis, thank you for coming in from Rockland.
Oh, and thank you for
the a long commute for you.
Yeah, I hope you didn't see a lot of ash flying around.
No, I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for participating. And we will see you at the next one. And stay tuned. Follow our website. We've got some coming up. We don't have exact dates on all of them yet. The next one actually is my cousin Vinny on September 17th. So that's the next one for sure. But we're hoping to have a couple more between now and then. So thank you and enjoy your Thursday. And we'll see you soon. Stay safe and stay cool. And don't inhale all the ashes and stuff. So, all right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dennis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.